Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Art 186, Computer Graphics with Adobe Illustrator for the spring semester 2022. Today, I want to first find out from those of you who are attending this webinar, do you have any questions or do you need any help with any of the lessons or the assignment, the mask assignment? Anybody? So what I can do is I can share, you can share your screen and I can turn off the video recording if you'd like, if that bothers you. No? You have one? Okay. Jaron, go ahead. And if you don't mind, I'm going to go ahead and allow you to speak. So go ahead and unmute yourself, Jaron, and shoot. Let me hear what you have to ask.
Hello, Professor. So, yes, I just started my mask assignment, and I was trying to make a shape that was curved, but what I was trying to make was a curved or rectangle shape, but I wasn't able to get the anchors bend the way that I want them to.
Okay, if they don't, let's go ahead and I'm going to start with that. I'm going to go ahead and I'll go ahead and I'm going to mute you. And if I answer your question, let me know in chat. And if not, then you can speak again and let you know. Everything in Illustrator can be edited infinitely. So if you don't initially get the shape that you're going for, you can always go back and fiddle with it. And I'll show you a couple of different ways of creating curved paths. So let's do that first. So that kind of departs a little bit from what I was planning on doing, but that's just fine. So I'm going to go ahead and disable talking. So back. As a workaround for that, what I wanted to do, one of the things that I wanted to do that is talked about later, and this isn't a direct answer to you, Jaron, but it's something that you guys might think about while you're working, is to create another artboard, an artboard that's used simply to put extra parts, spare parts, so to speak. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and you can either use the artboard, not that one. There we go. Yeah, there we go. Here we go. Artboards. I can create a new one from here. What I like to do though is if I want to create an artboard, is I use the artboard tool down here. And as soon as you click on it, it takes you to a different place on the screen. You can see that the current artboard is outlined, okay, and has the little blue box around it. While that is selected, if I go ahead and I click the plus, notice that it makes a new one for me. And I can hold down the shift key and move that away a little bit. And then I can go back to the selection tool, the main selection tool. And now I have an extra artboard. So it's like having multiple projects built into one file, which can be very nice. Anyway, to talk about, Jaron, the curvature tool. Now, I don't know what tool you used to make it, but let's say, for example, if I use the curvature tool right here, and if you click and I click, okay, that's all I do is I get a straight line. But then as soon as I move to another point, notice how it wants to curve. And then I go to another point and it wants to curve, either depending on which direction I move the mouse, it curves to complete the circle, or I move more into a sine wave and then around and around and around until I get back to my initial point. And when I do that, when I go back to the first point that I created, you'll see that the pen nib appears and there's a little circle in the lower right-hand corner. What that does is that completes it so it is a finished shape. Now what I can do is I can, without going anywhere else, I can click on any of these anchor points and I can move them, and notice how they get configured. Okay. Now, if I want the point to go in another direction, I can hold down. Let's go ahead and hold down. What I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to the direct selection tool. And when I select it, let me go ahead and let's take away the fill, or I'm going to swap. Okay. So now what I can do is I can take each of these points and I can delete them, or I can add additional points, or I can edit them by selecting the direct selection tool. So I have to click off of it first, click back again, and you'll notice that now I can manipulate these points like so, and I can use the handles to edit the point. And if I want, for example, if I want this to come to a sharp point instead of a curve, then underneath the pen tool, I would use the convert or the anchor point tool. And if I click on that path, notice how it comes to a sharp point now. If I want to bring that back out as a curve, I use the same tool to click and drag to pull that out like so. So if you just want to edit and move the points around, use the direct selection tool. Whoops. And you can move them like so. If I want to remove points, remember what happens. If I remove this point here, where my mouse is pointing, it's going to make a path from here to here. And I may not get the desired look that I'm going for, but if I go back here and under here and I say delete anchor point and I click here, watch what happens. See how it creates a, probably, I don't know, let's go ahead and click, make sure that I'm clicking, oops, I got to make sure that I have the direct selection tool. Click on the path, now I can pull that back out again. And really your goal in Illustrator is to use as few points as possible to create the desired shape. It will be much more efficient and you'll have much better, I think, results in terms of creating an aesthetically pleasing shape than if you use a bunch of points. Now, I don't know, does that answer your question, Gerald, or no? Okay, well, you can use the pen tool or you can use the curvature tool, either one, depends. The pen tool is an older tool. The curvature tool is one that was released more recently. And you can use them, you know, back and forth. You can use both of them. If I go back with this shape selected, watch, and with it selected, I can go back to the curvature tool. Let's go back to, where is it? There we go. And you can see that those curves reappeared. Now, some of them I don't want. So if I select it and I delete it, you can see that I can click on them and I can delete. If I double click on them, notice that it goes to a corner point, just like I had done with the pen tool. But this gives you, if you look at the overall shape, it's aesthetically really pleasing, the curves. And then if I double click on the path again, it goes back to a curved point. If I want to add a point on this path, I just simply move over an empty space on the path and I click, and you'll see that there's a little plus in the lower right-hand corner of the pen. And that adds yet another point to it. And you can create some really elegant, beautifully designed, you know, very aesthetically pleasing, you know, elegant curves without any, you know, that from a design point of view look good. And that's generally the problem that we have when we try to do from a photograph and we want to create a simplified, stylized version of it. The problem that arises, even when you use just a few different colors, is that it creates way too many anchor points, way more than what you need. So that's what I wanted to talk about next, and then talk about grouping. And then, so for example, for me, it would probably be easier rather than to image trace this. It would be easier for me just to put it in the background and use it as a template and draw on top of it. But I'll show you what happens again when we select the image. So let me make sure that I go back over here. I didn't want to create a point. I got the wrong tool. I got to make sure that I use the right tool, the selection tool. There we go. So now with this shape selected, I can go ahead in here and make sure that the image trace panel is visible. And I do that by going under Window and going to Image Trace and making sure it's checked. And then what you also want to do is make sure that you have advanced, the little twirly here, that's selected, so you have greater control over the path and how the paths that it creates from this photograph, because it uses color and it uses tonal changes to determine the shapes, and it just creates a boatload of them, many more than what you want, really. So when I select this, instead of using the default preset, I mean, you can click that and you can look at preview. And what that does, it gives you a black and white version. And sometimes they can look pretty cool. They can be kind of neat. And it just might give you something that you don't want. Then we can go from default to color. Now, if we go to high fidelity photograph, it's just it takes a lot longer to trace, but it's just going to give you tons and tons and tons of little tiny shapes that you don't want to have to deal with. Now, it looks like I haven't done anything. It looks like a photograph. It looks like the photograph that I had before. But if you did want something to look like a photograph and you really didn't want to edit it much in Illustrator, then this wouldn't be a bad way to go. If you wanted to print this 5 times the size that it currently exists, because now it's been vectorized, or it's been turned into a vector drawing. And remember, vector drawings are not incumbent upon having a higher resolution, that they exist on their own. So now I can expand this, and you can see when all the highlights in blue, even within the gray areas, there's a gazillion shapes. And it would be just horrible. It would be impossible to go back in and edit. So I don't know if you see that if I hit Command Y to turn that off. Whoops. Command Y. There are all the shapes. It's just a mess. But for something that looks fairly photographic, it's not a bad choice. And now I can do with it what I want. So I'm going to undo this a few steps. And let's even use maybe 3 or 4 colors, and you'll still see a huge number of shapes that were created. So I'm back again. I don't want to expand. I want to undo so that it go back to image trace again. And this time, instead of black and white, I'm going to go back to color, but I'm going to use this down here for, this one where it says colors. The minimum is 2, the maximum right now is 30. I'm going to go down to maybe 4. And let's click on preview to see what we get. So it's a much more simplified, stylized interpretation of that. Now, for our purposes, may not be a bad way to go. And if it's easier for you to trace, if it's easier for you to work with, that's fine. But one of the things that I want to show you, once I expand it, that I'm going to deselect, and I'm going to use the direct selection tool, because this is still a group. But what you can see here is that if I select this and I move this shape on top, let's move it over here. look at all the anchor points here. A ton of them, because it traces the image pretty accurately. And if I just drew on top of this, I could maybe do this in 1, 2, 3 different points, and that's it. Okay, anchor points. That's all I would need for the one horn. And then I would use the mirror tool or the reflection tool to flip it, get another one. And I could continue to draw and make my eyebrows and eyes and face and interior shapes, and maybe add a pattern for the hair and the beard, and come up with something kind of neat. And then I could go back again. And because it is already constructed from, of various shapes, I could get rid of this background, and then put another background in here. Now, something about creating shapes is that they're and this is another topic that I wanted to cover today, is that there are 3 different modes, and it's in a little tiny box down here in the lower left-hand corner. Okay, you can draw normal. That's what is selected by default. You can draw behind, which isn't a bad idea. So let's try that. So for example, if I want a shape behind this image, and I was going to put a gradient, or I was going to put, a pattern behind him, the only way that you can do that, it's not like Photoshop. You can't just click fill and it will fill on that layer. You have to actually create a shape. So I'm going to make the rectangle tool my background. And here is that background shape. Now it's the same color that I had before, but now I can come back up to this, and maybe I want this to be, if that's orange, red, maybe I want it to be kind of a green background or something like that. Let's go ahead, and I don't want that to be there. I'm going to flip this like so. That doesn't work so hot, but let's try something different. I want the stroke to be none. I want the fill to be kind of a lighter green. I don't want that one. That one, I don't know. None of these are looking that good. Let's try a gradient. Maybe that works. And then I could go back to my gradient tool, which we haven't gotten to yet. But if I click here, and I could go ahead and I could move these guys around. Let's go over here and let's rotate it like so. And let's go ahead and move it down. So move it down. And if I want this to fill the entire, image, I can, or if I want it to be just part of the image, I can do that. But that's what you have to do. Okay, I've outlined it. I have removed the background, and in place of the background, I had to create a rectangular shape and then filled it with a gradient where I could add a pattern or do whatever I want with it. Okie doke. So enough on image trace. If you have any questions about it, please let me know. But to leave the illustration as is like this would not be acceptable. I mean, you would get a grade for doing it, but it's not, in a pinch, you might want to do something like that for a client because you don't have much time, but these assignments are like tests for you. So I want them to demonstrate to me your knowledge and mastery of the skills involved in creating shapes from scratch and using the curvature tool and later the pen tool and things like that. Okay. So some of the other things that you can do with this. I worked on drawing behind, but what you have to do is you have to remember to make changes there if you plan on doing that again, because by default, every time you create a new shape in Illustrator, it automatically builds it on top of the last. And so that's a customary way that I work. And if I want to, in certain situations, draw something behind it, then I will use that feature. But you have to remember to go back and say, draw normal. There is also a third way of doing that, and that's drawing inside shapes. And that can be extremely useful. So for example, if we were drawing our mask from scratch, let me go ahead and remove this shape. I could use it, but I don't know. I'm just going to go ahead over here and I'm going to draw an oval shape, an ellipse. So this head is sort of like an oval. It's not exactly, but you get the idea. And then I wanted to draw shapes and colors inside. So for example, let's say I wanted to start with his beard color inside that. So what I could do for make sure that I have the fill selected in the foreground, and let's say I want to use kind of a reddish brown for the interior, maybe something a little bit darker. Okay, there we go. And now what I want to do is I want to draw some shapes inside of this. So let's go ahead and let's combine two ellipses that are going to go inside and then edit them for the red component of his face. That's what it kind of reminds me of. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch here and I'm going to, with that shape selected, I'm going to say draw inside. And as soon as I do, you'll notice that these little broken dotted lines appear. Now anything that I draw will be inside. So I'm going to continue with the ellipse tool, only I'm going to, let me deselect first. Let me go back. Let me try the red here. And I'm going to go ahead and draw inside. And I'm going to draw the shape. Okay. So it's, you know, close to what we have here. Let's make it a little bit more rounded. Let's go ahead and rotate it a little bit. And I'm going to move it over like so. And if I move it way over here, notice that it clips it off. I'm drawing inside that shape. That can be a real benefit to you when you're creating your illustrations. So there's one. Let me go ahead and mirror it, and then I'm going to join them together. But it's inside that shape. This becomes a clipping mask. Now, the horns could be separate shapes, and they could be drawn behind. I would probably want all of these interior shapes to be drawn inside, and I could come back with this background image here, and I could add a texture to this if I wanted. I can do any number, you know, you could, whatever your imagination, wherever it takes you, is what you can do. So I'm going to come back here, and this time I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use under here the reflect tool, and I'm going to click here. Oh, I'm going to option click one. Let's click here. There we go. I'm going to flip the horizontal, and I'm going to make a copy. Okay, so not exactly the way I had planned it, but it doesn't matter. I can go back with a shape tool, with a selection tool, and move these together like so. And I think for this to work, I don't want an outline. So for each of these, I'll select them. I'm going to make sure that the outline here is set to none. But what I want in the end, and you can see where I'm going with this, is that I want this to be a combined shape. There's two ways to go with that. You can either use the shape builder tool to construct one, or if I want to leave them as two separate shapes, I can turn them into a group. So in the future, if I need to move them, they behave as one element, but I can always go back and edit them if I so choose, you know, independently of one another. So for the moment, I've decided, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to combine the two shapes. So what I need to do is I need to select them first. So let's go back and select this one. And let's select this one. No, let's go back. I'm going to go back in layers and see where we're at with this. So I'm going to go ahead and here is my clipping mask. I'm going to go inside there, and I don't want the whole thing selected. I just want this one, and I want this one selected. So This is at a time when layers can be really helpful to help you isolate and to select individual elements that are really part of a group now, or a clipping mask. And now what I can do is I can use the shape builder tool and I can click and drag across these. Nope, it won't let me do it. So because it's a part of the image, the fill image. So I probably should have done that ahead of time, or I should take it out of that group and put it back inside the group. So let's do that. I'm going to go ahead and hit Command X to cut. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to switch just to show you that when things go wrong. Okay, now let's go ahead and I can go to Edit and I can say Paste in Front. So it goes back. And now with both of those shapes selected, notice that this tool works. So now it's one single element. And if I want to put it back inside that shape, then what I have to do is I have to deselect. So let's go back here. Deselect, select this shape here and turn it to down here to draw. Will allow me to draw inside. So let's go back again. Sometimes things just don't work the way you had planned them to work. Let me go ahead and take this one then, and I'm going to cut it. Now I'll select this one, and maybe it will work now. No, it's not going to let me draw inside it. I don't know why, because maybe it's still a clipping mask. So what I need to do is I need to take this and move it outside of the clipping mask. And then because nothing is in the clipping mask anymore, I need to get rid of it. So let's go back again. No, let me undo. So let's go back again. Let's turn this off, turn this off. This is still a clipping mask, so I need to expand it. That's why it won't allow me to do that. So I'm going to go to Object, and I'm going to expand. And it shouldn't be a clipping mask any longer. And it looks like it still is. Very weird. So let me try again. Now I can draw inside. Because it was still a clipping mask, I know this might be confusing for you. I'm kind of groping my way around too. And that's what happens when I build my own illustrations. Now I can select Draw Inside once again, and I can go to Edit, and I can select Paste and Place, and it puts it inside. So now when I move this back and forth, you can see that it's inside the shape. So if I decide to enlarge part of it, let's bring this guy back to, make, maybe I wanted this red part to actually extend beyond the hair a little bit. I could go ahead and I can pull this apart. I can pull this apart a little bit. And notice that I don't have to worry about cutting off the little pieces outside here, that it's automatically drawn inside. But again, you have to remember that if you want to remove it from inside of that, you have to first go back here and you have to say, you know what, I'm going to draw normal. Then go over to layers, and you can see that this is in a clipping mask. When you select it, select the shape, you can see that all three of these shapes, or the clipping mask and the interior shape, are all part of this. So if I want to, this one element, so if I want to edit any parts of it, I have to then just select the one and not the other. So for example, if I just wanted to select and edit this again, I could go back and I could, make this a little bit smaller once again. But I have to make sure that just it is selected and nothing else. Now, instead of drawing inside, there's another way to do this. So let's go ahead and select this shape. When I move it, notice that they all move as a single element. Okay, let's go ahead and close this. Should be back to drawing normal. I am. So in part of your lesson in lesson 4, you're taking elements and you're combining them together into one. So for example, I think they created sort of an apple or a pear-like shape. I can go ahead and again, with the ellipse tool, let's work with the red. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna create a shape. If you hold down the Option and the Command or Control key, I can click and drag, hold down the Shift key, and I can make a duplicate of it. That's the quickest way of making a copy, by the way, is holding down the Option or Alt key, depending on whether you're on a PC or a Mac. If you're on a Mac, it's the Option key and then the Command key. If you're on a PC, it's the Option key and or Alt key rather, and the Control key. So now I've made 2, and you can leave them like that. Let's go ahead and deselect. And let's make another one on top. So now by using smart guides, I can find the center of this. Okay, and click and drag, hold down the Shift key and the Option key, make it from the center. And now if I want this, let's see. Let's say I want these to be a unit like that. I don't know what I'm making here. Okay, I can leave it like that as 3 separate shapes, but it looks like one. This is where you have the option. Do you want to use the shape builder tool to build them together as one unit, or do you want to leave them independent units, but you want the ability to move them around later? So to do that, you would have to turn them into a group. So let me go ahead and Shift click, make sure that they're all selected. And now hit Command G or go to Object Group, Command G to group them together. And again, when you look at your layers panel, you can see that they are a group. And this is different than a clipping mask. They have similar properties, but they're slightly different. And now what this affords me to do is that if I decided, you know what, I wanted to move these around a little bit. I want to resize them, but leave them inside the group. So now what I do is I select from here, and I can use the direct selection tool or the group selection tool. And if I click on the group selection tool, now I can work on these and I can move them independently of one another. Okay, and maybe what we did with that apple is, let's see, what'd they do with that? Let me come back here. And let's say instead I want them up here in this shape. I want to reconfigure this all together like so. Okay, and then I go back to the move tool, and you can see that this is still all one group shape. So that affords you the opportunity to make changes and edit to it. And at any time, if you want to make a copy of it, you can. So I can take the group, hold down the Option key, move it, make a copy of it, so that if I want to go back at any time, I can. Then I can come back and I can take these and let's go ahead and use the let's go ahead and ungroup them first. Let's select and then what I can do is I can take here, let's go back to Object Ungroup, just Shift Command G, and now I can select all 3, and then I can come back and I can use the shape builder tool to combine them as a shape. Now it's all one shape. So now that affords me, if I needed this shape over here for some reason, I still have this one over here. It's 3 separate shapes that I can go back and edit at any time. Again, you can go back and you can, if you use, like I said, an extra artboard or two like I've done, you can always come back and duplicate shapes and have, different options for yourself in the event that you decide to go a different direction later on. Okay, so that's another option for you. We can go back and use groups. You can draw inside, you can use the shape builder tool. And as I showed you the other day, this isn't a bad approach. Let's say I wanted to build his nose. Okay, so this is something that I might try to do. I'm going to go ahead and layer one here. Let's go back. I've been using all these on the same layer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lock. Let's go back to layers here. I'm going to take and I'm going to lock this layer so that I can't accidentally select it. I'm going to go ahead and lock the background in case I need it. And now what I want to do is this allows me to draw on top of this. Okay, so maybe I should go ahead and just create a brand new layer and name it nose. So if you want to go ahead and click in there, name it nose, I can do that. And now this will be on top of everything. So what I'm going to do with red, I'm going to turn this into a stroke. And maybe I should start with a different color here, just so I can see it. I'm going to work with black and white and turn this into, I want a black stroke and I want no fill here. So I'm going to make sure that here I have no fill. I bounce around different locations. Sometimes I'll be in the properties panel. Sometimes I'll work over here in the tool panel, but it really doesn't matter. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and with the line tool, I'm just going to make a simple line. And to make sure that it's perfectly straight, I'm going to hold down the Shift key. Okay, so here's my stroke. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the width tool like I did the other day. And let's use the move tool to move this over a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and use my arrow keys on my keyboard to do that, to move it over. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the width tool. So I'm going to click here and pull this out like so. And now what I'm going to do, I'm going to come up here and I'm going to pull this in like so. Okay. And now what I can do is I can pull this out a little bit and make this a little bit rounded here. And let's go ahead and pull this down a little bit so that this pulls down. Okay, it doesn't come all the way to the end. I didn't do this correctly. So what I can do is I can go back to, we're done with this. Let's go back to the edit tool and click on the edge here. I can pull it down. Okay, now I can go back to the pen width tool again, or the tool, and I can go ahead and I can pull this out and make it a little bit bigger. Now I can go back to the direct selection tool. And what I want to do is, because this is a path, at some point I should probably convert this into a shape. And that will allow me to draw the other elements. And then if I want, I can create little ellipses and put them inside this for his nostrils. And then I can change the color, or I can do whatever I want. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a copy of this. So I'm going to use the selection tool. I'm going to go ahead so I can go back to it at any time. Holding down the Option key and make a copy of it. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this one and I'm going to go to Object. And what I want to do is I want to go to Path and I want to outline stroke. So now this is an outline shape, and it was much easier than trying to draw around his nose. Now I can come back with the direct selection tool, and you can see that I can select an individual anchor point and I can move it up. Let's zoom in here a little bit so I can see what I'm doing. And you can see that I have some extra points here that I really don't want. It created some by mistake. So what I can do is I can use the pen tool minus, and let's get rid of some of these. I want to get rid of this one here. Come on. Didn't I use the delete? Yeah. It's saying, oh, I know why. Because this is a, got it. See, sometimes it's, this is a, was a handle for this. Okay. So what I need to do is let's go back under here. I'm going to use the, under the pen tool, I'm going to use the anchor point tool, and I'm going to click and drag to make this a little bit more rounded. Okay. And I'm going to select here and use the direct selection tool. And I'm going to move this down a little bit. And if this isn't working for me, I'm going to undo a couple of steps. I don't like any of that. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try the curvature tool. And now what I can do is I can click here and notice that it is actually two curves. I don't want that here. I don't want plus. I'm going to go ahead and select one and I'm going to delete it. I'm going to go ahead and select one here and I'm going to delete it. And now what I want to do is I want to click over this one and notice how it comes to a point. Well, I don't want a point. I'm going to double click on it and make sure that it's round, nice and rounded. I can go ahead and I can either pull this out a little bit and make it nice and rounded. I can move this one around. So this is where the curvature tool really helps. I want to make sure that this is somewhat symmetrical. So I'm going to move these points around a little bit, just nudge them a tad, or select them and delete them as needed. So I think in the end, the curvature tool was really my best bet for editing this. And let's go ahead and click in here. Pull that out a little bit. Let's click in here, pull that out a little bit. Now let's go ahead and select some of these and get rid of some of the extra points. And try to make this somewhat symmetrical. Let's go ahead and add a point here. Let's go ahead and move these around so I can make this a little bit more symmetrical. And before you know it, you have the elements that you need for his nose. And then, like I said, when I'm done with this, we're going to go back to the basic selection. And what I want to do is I want to draw his nostrils inside there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide or Command Y, the outline of that. And I need to make two ellipses for his nostrils in here. So I'm going to select the path and I'm going to go ahead, and this is a good way of selecting draw inside. Now what I'll do with the ellipse tool is I'll go ahead and I'll draw one nostril. And let's move that around a little bit. And let's move it and rotate it a tad. Move it into position. Whoops. Want to do that. Let's go ahead and move it. That's what I wanted to do. I don't want to move that. I want to move. That's where things can get messed up. I want to select the interior shape. See, I've already kind of goofed. So let me undo this. So now I can go ahead and rotate this a little bit. Now I can make it a little bit bigger. Out. And let's see what I have. It's filled with black. I'm going to make sure that it's filled with a different color. Let's fill it with, we'll leave it black. Fix red. Now let's go back and hit Command Y. And you can see that it's drawn inside that shape. Now, if I want, you can always come back and edit the shape of his nose. It doesn't look quite right now, but I think you get the basic idea of what I'm talking about here. I can go ahead and I can select the interior shape and I can duplicate it. So if I go back to my group selection tool, I can take this one. No, it's not going to allow me to do it. So I need to go back to the nose and I need to go inside the clipping path. And I need to select just this one. Let's see if I can't go ahead and make a copy of this now. I'm on the option key. There we go. Now let's go ahead and rotate it so that it matches the other one. And there you go. Now let's go ahead and let's turn this shape of his the background for his nose brown. Then I would probably fiddle with the top a little bit, but you get the idea for creating the basic shapes. So let's go back again, make sure that I'm no longer drawing inside. Let's select this shape. Make sure in layers that just this shape is selected. And then instead of a black fill, let's go ahead and select my brown fill. We'll make that darker brown. Okay, maybe darker yet. You can see that I can create on top of there some pretty nice shapes. Now, obviously, these shapes need to be tweaked and edited, but I'm just trying to show you that there's a whole slew of different ways of working. You're not restricted to any one. Whatever works for you is what you need to consider. And if I pull this away now, come on. You get the idea. Now, I obviously would have to make the bridge of his nose a little bit wider and then pull this down and round it off. But you get the idea of how I can, begin to create the shapes that I need. And then create another shape behind that for his mustache and shadows. And I can fill this background shape that we created. I already did that. But let's zoom out and reconfigure this before we end today. So I'm going to move this over, move this. So to get a better idea of the shape that I want for him, let's go ahead, and I don't want to do that. Let's go back and select that shape. Let's see. That's a group. So let's go back here. Where is it? There we go. It's this one here. So I just want to select this shape here, none of the others. And I can go ahead and I can reconfigure that. I can change that again using the curvature tool. And I can pull this down a little bit. I can add an anchor point here and pull that out. Add an anchor point here and pull that out a little bit. And we can add an anchor point here for his jaw. I can add a anchor point here for his jaw here. And now let's square his jaw up a little bit. So I'm going to move this over a little bit. I'm going to create an anchor point here and pull these guys down a little. So in no time at all, I've created, whoops, I didn't want to do that. Something that fairly resembles, I probably need to turn off snap to grid so I can get a better idea of what I'm doing here. But you get the idea of what I'm doing here. So let me go back to view, turn off snap, smart guides, snap to glyph. No, I don't want to snap to anything. Sometimes the snapping is nice, but sometimes it also gets in the way. Snap to grid, snap guides, rulers, smart guides. I don't want to snap to anything. Snap to pixel. Okay, let's see if this helps. A little bit. move this out just a little bit. There we go. Again, try to maintain symmetry. And again, if that doesn't work for you, another way of doing this would be to cut this in half and then mirror it and join it together if you want it to be perfectly symmetrical. Okay, now I'd need to go back in here and I'm going to make his teeth, and on top of that or behind it or cut it through it, I could add his eyes, his eyebrows, and so on and so forth. So I don't know. Yeah, if you need help at the end, we can do that. So I'm just kind of throwing things out here. I'm showing you how I would work and how I would experiment with different drawing techniques. Okay. And hopefully this is, of help for you, so that when you're working on your mask assignment, you don't feel that there's any one way of actually working. It's for you, it's an experimentation time. And I would do the same thing. And I would make sure that I add an extra artboard, come back and tweak and play with it until I get something that's working for me. Some of the shapes are going to be quite obvious. If I come back here and I want to make, again, let's use the curvature tool. So here, if I click here, and I click here, and I click up here, notice how it's creating a really nice shape. And if I double click here, it turns into, so I want this to come to a point. So what I'm going to do is take this and I'm going to move this one down. So, and then double click so that it comes to a point. Move this like so. And in short order, I've made a horn. Go ahead and make the, the mirror image of it, send it to the back, and I'm set to go. Okay. So that's it for today. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording. And for those of you who have a question, hang in there and I'll do my best to answer any questions for you. Okay. So that's it. You guys are free to go. I'll pause my recording. And unless you have questions, then stick around and I will answer them for you. Or if you guys don't mind being recorded, I'll continue to record this. And that is, I'm helping you, that might help other people with their projects. What I'm going to do though, is while I'm recording though, is I'm going to have you share your screen so I can see what you're doing. So which will work for you. I'll just pause